couple of weeks ago, I raised the question of what is a Grail watch, following my own discovery of having a Grail I didn't even know was a Grail for me. I asked the question of you, you guys answered. Let's talk about this a little bit more. Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. And as I said, this is kind of the follow-up to the video I did earlier, really uncovering my journey to understanding that I hadn't really thought about what a Grail was, really. I just kind of dropped into a default, most expensive watch kind of option. And then I threw it open to you and asked, what do you think as a community would be a Grail watch? What's your definition of it? The first thing I'd say is I really liked that the vast bulk of responses came back, starting with phrases like, for me, a Grail is, I think a Grail for me would be ... I think for this topic in particular, there is no carte blanche answer which you can apply to a whole bunch of other people. A Grail is really defined, a Grail watch is really defined by each person's individual relationship to that watch. And so what is a Grail watch is clearly going to change for each person. And it was kind of nice to see that coming out in the way that people were talking about it and not trying to impose their definition on others. I suppose what comes next is I'd say the responses on what is a Grail watch fell into four broad categories. The first was very puritanical, very poetic, but I'm unconvinced it was all that useful. And they're people who took it very, as I say, sort of a purist of view, that essentially a Grail is a watch that ruins you. A Grail is a watch that is the last watch you will ever buy. A Grail is the watch that makes you sell your car or sell your house, or that you save for decades to achieve, and put off enormous other life events. There was a small but fairly committed group of people who really thought that that's what a true Grail is. And on one level, I kind of get that. In fact, the purity of that is appealing. I also fear that unless you're obsessive to a pathological degree, no one is ever going to get to use the word Grail again then. To describe someone as having a Grail is to define them as being mentally unstable. And so I don't think it's a particularly helpful definition. For those of you who love that, go with it. I don't care. But it's not a definition I think a lot of people are going to embrace. I think the next, probably it wouldn't be the single biggest. I'll finish with that one. But a really big category of people very definitely were using the definition I was using. That is, it is a very expensive watch. It is a watch which really stretches you financially, which would be amongst the most expensive pieces you could imagine buying. There was some pushback, frankly, on my idea that I had moved some money around, reprioritized, and then purchased a Grail within a few weeks or months. There was some pushback that, well, if that's all it took, then this watch couldn't really have been a Grail. Not a lot, just a little bit of gentle kind of, really, I wouldn't think that you could get a Grail that easily. There was another group of people for whom a Grail wasn't defined at all by price, but rather the quest to obtain it. How much work does it take to find this watch? How much work does it take to source this watch? How much is it, this was, again, in a sense, a kind of a purist view of saying, if you can simply go out and buy a watch, no matter what the price, if you can simply find it available in the condition and in the way you want, it cannot be a Grail. A Grail must have a search, must have a quest associated, and simply saving money shouldn't be enough to get a Grail. The final and clearly largest group was the idea that a Grail piece is some sort of secret sauce combination of the last two. It's some mix of hard to get, huge searching, disappointments in trying to find it, combined with some level of cost and difficulty to achieve and the need to save or do something. So that was really the four categories. People mixed and matched a little bit, but I would broadly say it broke down that way. So where did I find myself landing? I was originally very much I fell into that first definition, the second definition. That is a very financially focused. If my general niche is somewhere between, say, 2,000 and 5,000 US dollars. That's kind of where I collect. There's a few watches on my list that go up to 10, 15,000. No, none go to 15. 10 to 12,000 US. And there's like three of those. And so they would be my Grail, or one of those would be my Grail piece. That was kind of what I fell into. What I found was that turned out to not work. What I found was I had a much cheaper watch, which I had been, without ever calling it a Grail, without ever thinking of it in that way, I had spent truly enormous time trying to find. I had searched, I had standing searches all over the internet. I found these things occasionally and then engaged with sellers and tried to buy them and couldn't. And there was never the right watch. It was never the right condition. It was never the right build. It was never the right year. There was always something wrong. And it was 3 years, basically, of searching and of disappointment, which finally all came together for a watch that wasn't that expensive in monetary terms. But if I could put all the hours together in finding and buying this one, was probably, frankly, on my charge out rate, I spent way more than on finding the watch than I did on buying the watch. That became my Grail. So for me, I have now shrunk down to a Grail piece. For me, is not a generic watch which you can buy at some price. It's, in fact, a Grail piece is a very specific watch which cannot be purchased ordinarily, which requires a deep and detailed hunt, which may be full of disappointment and opportunities to go wrong and all sorts of things. For me, that's what defines my Grail. Right now, I don't have one. There is no watch. I've got a long list of watches I want to buy, but frankly, all of them are relatively easy to buy. They're all, right now, every single watch on my wanting to buy watch is available on Chrono 24 right now. Something happens, I have $100,000, I can just go buy and pick every watch I want. There is nothing that I'm hunting that satisfies my internal criteria of a Grail piece. Okay, so before I go, I'll finish this up with, well, what was my Grail piece? I'm going to do a why this watch later, probably next weekend, where I talk about it a little bit more in a bit more detail. But I think it would be unfair not to say anything right now. Okay, my Grail piece was a late 1960s Alpina C-Strong 10. Several years ago, I got into watches and I bought the re-edition of the Alpina C-Strong Heritage. And in doing that, I got fascinated by the OG, the original. And I always wanted it. I always wanted that watch to be as a kind of a bookend. And so I've searched and been involved in lots of inquiries and auctions and trying to find the right one. And I found it. And the seller was extraordinarily helpful, bent over backwards to get it for me. The watch clearly heard me refer to it as a Grail and therefore decided to insert some more drama, some more challenge into the quest for me to own the C-Strong 10. It's got lost. Its tracking data vanished off the face of the earth. Repeated calls to the delivery guys were just met with robo responses. It was nightmarish, and part of me was thinking, oh my god, I have blown this completely. But it has arrived. I'm in love, and yeah, it has, unbeknownst to me, for all that time, it was my Grail, and it wasn't until I got really close that I realized how much it had meant to me and how much I had put into trying to buy it. And the other thing is too, it's also changed to me as a collector. I sort of got this, and all of my searches for vintage Alpinas have just gone. I've just closed them all down. This is kind of the exclamation mark on that part of my collecting. That said, I'll probably come back here one day, but for the time being, at least for the foreseeable future, there's a full stop at the end of my my journey on being a vintage Alpina collector, and I'm going to look to something else. I don't even know what that is right now. Anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches, me having a bit of a chat about what constitutes a Grail, me talking a little bit about what was my Grail. I don't have one right now, and I'll see you later. Bye.